So wherever you are, I think there's something here for everyone. Now, Umesh, he's a student out of India, and he had 2 or 3 weeks where he was at a loose end and was interested in the project. In fact, in that time, he managed to get 5 pull requests merged, and he's saying what an amazing community it is. Now, the reason that happened for him is because he was very proactive. He used to make suggestions and say, can we improve this? What about if we did that? And I think that's a great way of seeing that this is a two-way stream. So sometimes we will document things in a GitHub issue and people will pick it up. And other times there'll be suggestions made and it can go back to you and you can help us with your own input. But, some people aren't really clear about how they want to help the project. They just want to be involved. They're so excited about this space. So Ajit is a Docker captain and he's saying, I just want to contribute in that space. Dale, he has this sense of needing to give something back, which is very common. I was chatting to Just earlier today and he said something similar. And I think if you feel like this is where you're coming from, what's really helpful is to set yourself a couple of small goals so that you can actually put something around this. What would it mean for me if I was to contribute? What would I like to add? Now, one of the benefits of having a contribution in the project is you get to be on this great slide that I'll take around to all of my presentations. Now, I don't do that because of no reason, right? I do that because I'm proud of this community. And this is what I said at the beginning of the talk. It's your input that's got us to 2,000 commits. It's your input that's got us to 90 contributors and 11,000 stars. I have put a lot of work into this from the beginning, but really it would be nowhere near where it is now if it wasn't for the people on this slide. Now, I want to give a bit of special recognition to the people at the top right. We have Eric, Stefan, Jock, Burton, and Richard Gee. Now, these people are in the core contributor group in the project, which means that they have gone above and beyond, that they're very regular contributors, and they've taken it upon themselves to actually help me and guide the direction of the project. And they're really thinking about how can we make this something that not only we want to use, but our friends would want to use too. And that's where the OpenFaaS project values came in. It was through this small group of people working closely together that we worked out that actually we had these values already, and so we wrote them down. And the first one is to be developer first. And I think because you guys want to contribute, a lot of you are developers. So we want things to be unsurprising so that you can just come in and get the code up and running even in 60 seconds. There shouldn't be anything complicated, any deep multi-page document to go through to get started. We have a CLI and a UI, and the CLI has actually had probably the most contributions from the community because it's really what you touch first as a developer, and people have made that a very rich experience. This is operator friendly. Now that's just jargon for saying your ops team or your infrastructure guys are going to be okay with it. It can run on any cloud. And because it's Unix-like, that means that we have very small pieces that are easy to work on and change if they don't quite fit what you need. Now, this is community-centric, as you should have seen from that contributor slide. We have this open platform, and one of the things that I really love about the community is this kind of developer love that I first saw with the Docker community when I joined it. We had 7 different meetups happening all around the world where people were talking about OpenFaaS. And today alone, one of the Docker captains launched a course on Udemy about learning the basics of OpenFaaS. I think that's really a special thing when you see people take to a project like that, and your contributions to this project will help this even further. Now, what can you do to help? This is something that I think is good to write down because it's not always clear. The first thing is not very big. It's just participate on Slack. So welcome new people in and make a connection. If you see somebody join, say hi to them and say welcome. It can really make a difference. I've had a lot of people say that they found getting a warm welcome in this community helped them feel a part of it. The other thing that you can do without writing any code is to engage with the ongoing proposals and issues that we're raising on GitHub and in the contributors channel on Slack. Now that might be something as simple as just reading it to keep up to pace, or it might actually be commenting on it or asking a critical question like, will this scale? Have you thought about X? And that kind of stuff. Now, one thing that helps me to help you is when you can answer GitHub issues by giving support to new users. Now, Burton has been doing a great job of this, and one of the people that's working full-time on the project, Ivana, has done a lot of work here too. Now, this can often be very easy to do. And if you're using OpenFaaS, giving support to a new user can be quite easy. We have issues like people don't know about timeouts, or they want to know more about asynchronous functions. You can just point them at a docs page, or you can say, well, thanks for using OpenFaaS. Sorry you're having a problem. I'll try and get some help for you. Just something to interact with them. And I think everybody can do that. Now, when you look at larger projects, larger companies, you see whole teams of developer advocates, of evangelists. These are people that are writing samples and showing what can be done with a project. So then you don't necessarily have to write code for OpenFaaS. You may just go off and, like Erica's done, write a tutorial about how to deploy on Azure. And that is really, really useful. Some of the blog posts that I've seen have been the most popular were combining simple things like MongoDB and a function, or Michael Herman put together an example of how to build a RESTful API with 3 or 4 functions. So hopefully you're getting some ideas from this. This is all equally valid. You could be doing anything on here or writing Golang code for the core of the system, and you're going to help us out just as much. Now, I said that we had a lot of people talking about OpenFaaS around the world. So this is something that is actually happening, but you think about how many developers are out there, we can always use more. So if that's something that interests you, we have standard deck. Branding is all available on GitHub, and I'm happy to give people individual help or try and get you connected with meetup organizers. And then finally, this may sound obvious, but ask where help is needed. That's how Umesh got 5 pull requests merged in 1 week. He just asked, what can I do to help? I'll do anything. And then he managed to get to that point. And he enjoyed it as well. It wasn't like he was kicking a tin around a car park. He was doing stuff that added value to the project. Now, the other thing you can do, again, which is a smaller commitment, is to help by testing or just reviewing a pull request. And you can do that all on GitHub. So there's some of the things that you can do from an outward-facing point of view. Now, if you want to try to build a community specifically, and there are a few people that I know have got experience with this, like Kendrick on the call, you may just be inviting new people to Slack. There's a web page where you can give people that web page in the docs, and it tells them how to join. Every Friday, I'm sure most of you have seen FaaS Friday already. Just tweet something. If you don't know what to tweet, open the home page, make it look pretty and tweet that. It's all about getting energy behind the project. This really helps. I actually sometimes will go and trawl through GitHub and see what projects people have created with OpenFaaS. And some of the stuff I see there is really interesting. You can do the same. And if you see something that you like, reach out to that person. If you can find them on Twitter, for instance. We also have a channel, Twitter, OpenFaaS Twitter, and that has got all of the hashtags. So anything that's posted to Slack just turns up there. We talked about open issues. There's a bot that we have called Derek, and Richard does a lot of work on that, and also John McCabe. And Derek allows you to type in a command without having full write access on OpenFaaS. And you can do things like triage the issues, say what's most important, say if this is a hard or an easy skill level. And as we do that more and more, I'm hoping that will help you guys know where you can contribute more. So I wanted to run through the full process for submitting a change to the project. I've got a number of bullets here, but really they're quite sequential and it's quite easy to work through it. This is a condensed version of our contribution guide, and I might actually just run through this with you and show you how we could change the documentation on the CLI even right now. So the first thing we tend to do is search for an existing issue. Now, what I want to do is precisely that. Apparently, somebody, actually me, just merged a pull request to add build arg as a flag to our CLI. Okay. Is there any more information here? Not really. So I wonder if I updated the documentation. Let's take a quick look. So this is the FaaS CLI. I'm just going to search on the page. And it looks like I've not mentioned build arg. So let's look at the list. It's a search for issues or discussion. Well, what I can do is just type into this repository, build arg, do a search, and see if anybody's raised an issue yet to say that this is missing from the documentation. And it doesn't look like they have. My first job, if in doubt, is to raise an issue saying we need to add this to the documentation. Now, if you do that, that might be where you finish and you let someone else pick it up. Or it may be that you want to do it too. Now, this is just a very small change. It's adding documentation, so we don't really need to think about the impact of it for the whole system or whether we're volunteering to work on it. So we'll probably skip this bit. But if you were raising a code change, let's say you wanted to swap one of our components for something else, you may want to propose it and give a bit of detail. We should read the contribution guide. So let's have a quick look at that. So this is in the FaaS repository and it counts for every repo that you'll find. It's the same process. At the top, it tells you some of the things I've just been saying now, that you don't have to write Go code to help the project. It tells you a bit about how to write a proposal for a change, small or large. And we go on a little bit further down to the paperwork needed for a pull request. And that's where we actually get into adding the code. So let's take a quick look and start right at the beginning.
Right.
Normally, you will be in your home directory when you start to make a code change. And because we're writing projects in Go, they tend to be in a certain structure of Go source, github.com, and then organization and the project. Let's look for the CLI. I actually already have it. If you didn't have that, you could have just made this directory and then cloned with git clone. So the first thing I want to do is see what branch am I on.
Yeah, I have it.
Whoever's talking, are you able to mute your microphone, Mahesh? The first thing I want to do is make sure that I'm on the master. The master is where all of the regular work is on the main project. And actually, because I do have write access to this, I have OpenFaaS as my target. You will have forked this project and this will have your name in the gap. But when you clone it onto your computer, you do have to use the full name as it appears in the project. It's just a constraint of Go. So what I can now do is type in git pull origin, that means from the server, bring it down to my computer, and we should see some updates. I had a few updates came in, and now I'm level with what we have on GitHub. From here, I can type in code. That's the editor that I use, and we should see all of the files pop up. So what have we got? We were looking for the README. We'll try to keep the change quite brief. Now, the background of the build arg is that this allows you to pass in additional information to Docker when you're building your OpenFaaS function. So I'm just going to have a quick scan through and see where that might belong. If we have a section in here that makes sense. So I don't see anywhere where it would necessarily fit in, so I might just add it to the bottom under where we're talking about YAML. So custom build args, arguments with Docker. Now this isn't particularly detailed. I just want to show you the process. So I've added the change. Then over here, I'm going to type in git status. I can see once I've saved it that the change is there. This now says that I need to use a custom git branch. Now sometimes what people would do is they'll push the code from their master side across to master on OpenFaaS. That causes us some problems because it means we can't test it easily, and you could end up breaking some stuff. So what we tend to do is type in git checkout -b to create a new branch, and we could call this add build arg docs, for instance. At this point, I can add the file, and we need to think about the next thing in this list. Now, some of you will be very familiar with the commands that I'm typing in. I'm just going over it again so that when you try this for the first time, you'll see where everything fits in. It's a sign off your commits. And when you do a sign off of your commit, there's more information in the contribution guide. This will tell you, this tells the project that you are allowing us to use your code under the license of the project and that it originates from you. You have the rights to use it. Now, an example of when you may not have the rights to use it, maybe if it's some of your company's code, right? You clearly can't give us that. So you're signing that off. You're saying, yep, it's all good. You can have this, you can use it. Now, that depends on you putting a git config user.name in. And so I have my name here. You need to set yours as well. And email. So every signed off commit has a proper email on it. Now I'm going to type in git commit, and there's something new you have to put, which is -s. Okay, and that's the sign off. And then what we see is this line appears to show that that commit, when it goes up, is going to have the sign off on it. And then the project, we can check what you've done and say, yeah, we can accept that. Now, often on your first time commit, you may not be aware of this. It is in our pull request template, but if you don't know what it is, you may miss it. Don't worry, you can fix it. It's not hard to fix it. And then you can carry on with your work. Now, let's see. Write a thoughtful commit message. What does that mean? Well, in our guide here, contribution guide, there's just a few very small guidelines or rules that say that you should start the first line with an uppercase letter, don't go more than 72 characters, and don't end in a dot. And then anything after that should be separated by a line and not go further than 72 characters. And this is what an example would look like. This is just basic Git knowledge here. You can look some of this up on the internet as well. So let's see. Let's use a verb, added, build arg documentation, right? And then we can put a message. Build arg can now be used with FaaS build. We'll wrap the line around so that it's not too long to pass a secret to the Docker build. That's the point of this. And it's really useful for Node.js for private repositories. Now going to look at what happened in my local library with git log. And I can see we've got this come into the log. We've got the subject. It's wrapped nicely to the width of the screen. This is one of the reasons why we don't have very long messages. And then I've got my sign off. So let's take a quick look back. Now we should raise a pull request and show any testing. We don't need any testing for this as such. And then we may get some feedback. If we don't get any feedback, it will just get merged. Hopefully there'll be some positive feedback in that case. So let's take a look. This is the branch that I'm on, and I want to push that up to the origin. And we should see, or I will see, a pop-up in the UI, and it will prompt me to raise a pull request now. Here we go. And this is what I mean about from your own named branch. So on this side, it says add build arg docs rather than master. And anything that you've put in your commit message gets pre-populated here, which is really useful for filling out the document. So I've added the build arg documentation. What's the description? Let's fill this template in properly. Why is this needed? Well, we have an issue. The issue is about the build arg needed to cover new feature merged in PR. Now, you may think, well, why are you doing this, Alex, for a very small change? Well, we have up to 90 contributors, and there's at least 23 people on this call. We don't all have the context of what's going on. How has it been tested? Documentation already tested in PR. That's fine here. What is this? Let's call it a bug fix. And then we go through a checklist, just a final reminder. Does it follow the style that we saw it looked to do? Do we have to change the documentation? Well, we've done that. Have I read the contribution guide? Well, we scanned it. We probably should have read it in a bit more detail. And then have I signed off my commits? But that goes back to that message that we saw with the email address. And are there any tests that I've added? No. Do all of the existing tests pass? Yes. Finally, I can create the pull request, and everyone in the project will now be able to see that. And we can check on the commits tab to see if that really is signed off. It is. It's all good. So that is a process for making a code change all the way to the point where we now get feedback. We may have to change it a little bit, and then it will become merged. Does anybody have any questions about this process, this slide, before we go on to the next part?
I have one.
Yeah, do you want to say your name and then say your question?
Sure, this is Dale Bingham. When we do when we push up and do a pull request, do you always want it in a branch inside the OpenFaaS repo? You don't want it in your own personal one to do a merge request across?
Yeah, so it will have to be in your own branch, in your own fork, sorry.
Okay.
You can't push, yeah. So I'm guilty of not showing you the exact process, because I can push to the OpenFaaS branch, my own remote branch, but I won't often push to master. So even here, I've pushed to my own branch within that. And then when we see the merge, it's going to say from or into from. Okay. What if you forget though, what do you do then? So go back to the README and the build arg, and let's see, where were we? Here we go. Read more on the Docker docs. So we'll just put a link. And this time we won't sign the change. And we'll just see what happens. I'm going to save this, git status, I'm going to add it, and I'm going to go git commit, but this time I'm not going to put an S, and you'll notice the message isn't there. And I'm going to put in add link to Docker build command. Okay. Finally, going to push it up. Let's see what happens. Okay, so this is Derek. Derek's our automation for the project, and he looked at all of the commits in the pull request, and he saw that at least one of them didn't have a sign-off message, right? And that goes back to, there's more information about the sign-off message in the contribution guide. So how do you fix it? Does anybody know? Okay.
By amend, maybe.
Yeah, by amend. So let's do git commit amend, and now we can put a -s, and we see the message pops up, and it's now got the email address there, and we're good to go. And this is exactly what you do if you put in a commit message and you forgot what we had about cutting the lines off and the style, or maybe you just forgot to put a description in like I did here. You use the same command. And then we can look at our log, and we see that one commit has now been fixed. Now, sometimes you may have 3 or 4 that are like that, and you can fix them up too. And I'll provide a link that tells you how to rewrite the history. Now, I'd always say take a backup if this is the first time you're doing it. Even if you're more experienced, it's always worth taking a backup before you mess with your history, because I wouldn't want you to lose what you've done. Now, the push now is going to be different. We just do a regular push, it's not going to allow it. We actually have to do a force push because we've rewritten that bit of history. And it's up on the site, and Derek, he's actually okay about it now. He's taken the label off, and for me and the core contributors like John, we can now see that it's good. We can merge it as long as we're happy with it. Does that make sense? So this is a process that we should try to go through, but if you forget something or you're worried you've not got it right, don't worry. We're not gonna shout at you. We just want to help you get the process right so that we can just keep everything easy to manage and use. Now, I do want to get a few people to just quickly give a few tips. I know a few of you did agree to do this before the call. So let's see. Richard, do you want to tell us a bit about your tip?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So one is to just reiterate what you've been through, and that is read the contributing guide and then read it again. And when you're creating issues and PRs, make sure all the fields are completed, because it really helps us understand what's going on. It's a bit of a strange environment because I can't come and tap you on the shoulder at your desk and look at it over your shoulder. It's kind of a lot more remote. So yeah, make sure all the fields are filled in, and only really start work on an issue once it's been approved, which I know Alex has already mentioned that. FaaS Friday, if you're taking part in FaaS Friday, think about the reach, so how to extend the reach. So a good example would be the one that Alex alluded to earlier with the MongoDB function you put together. Now, if you were testing that or looking at that, or you created something similar, why not tweet it out with the FaaS Friday hashtag, but loop in MongoDB, for instance. They've got 303,000 followers. So, you only need a retweet from one of those, and then we've really extended the reach of Fast Friday. People start to say, what's this Fast Friday all about? Look into it, and then they come back to the project. And the last one for me is use OpenFaaS. It's really important, I think, that we get a user perspective on things and not get too kind of blinkered into the code. It's the user experience that we're really interested in, and how to make that better.
Yeah, that's true. I've been learning about Docker for about 2 years as a Docker captain, and I feel like there's this trap that we fall into of trying to come up with something even more technical, even more impressive and complex for the next blog post, but actually sometimes making a simple combination is actually all people want. And so if you're worried about where to start, you want to write a blog post, you can get an account on medium.com without committing to writing an entire blog and keeping it active, and just do a one-off blog post. I think Burton actually did that. Burton, are you around?
Yes, I'm here.
I think you had a couple of tips for us too.
Yes, my contribution story sort of follows exactly your slide from earlier about just getting involved in Slack and then GitHub, and then making the change, and then writing about it, and followed all of those steps. And the Hacktoberfest that GitHub and DigitalOcean put on was what got me into it, and just digging through the issues, and found one that was an issue with the Travis build, and I was familiar with Travis, so I put that commit in, and then like Richard just said, just started using OpenFaaS more, and then finding new and interesting ways of using it. Started writing about it on Medium, thanks to the push from you, Alex, which just led to me using it more, and then helping on GitHub more, and just sort of snowballed from there. And I will say, with the helping on GitHub, it was a little daunting at first, because I'm not an expert in Go or an expert in Docker by any means, but a lot of people are in the same boat I was in just 6 months ago, and I've already been through those troubles of figuring out how to get it configured and set up, and my new function won't run, and things like that. And been there and done that, so I know the answer, and it feels good to help out.
Yeah, it feels good for you, and I think that's a great reason for people to do this. It also helps me no end, the fact that you're there helping or being a first responder on the issues when I'm not about, or Ivana's not around, means that I can keep focused on making a presentation like this and inviting 26 people from new contributors to really experienced core developers of the project, to get them together and really just to focus on this. So that, don't underestimate what you're doing. I know this looks like a big project, like we've got it all covered. Seriously, we don't. This needs like a whole village. And the work that you've done is great. The Travis build, we're using that in every project to build Docker images. So yeah. And there's a few more people that we're going to give a few words. Does anyone want to volunteer?
I'll volunteer.
Go for it, Jock.
Yeah, so, well, first I would just like to say it's been actually pretty impressive to see where Burton's come from all this, and even did a presentation at Cloud Austin, which I was there, and it was really good for OpenFaaS. So definitely kudos to how he's been involved in that. And then one thing I'll say just about contributing, especially when you're in the channels and you're talking to people, just my thought is to just make sure to be respectful of other people and even the code that's come before. Sometimes I see one-off and comments that seem sometimes, I'm not saying they are, but they come across sometimes as being snarky or disrespectful. Just try to be mindful, because everyone's just trying to work on this project and have good feelings and all that kind of stuff. So don't assume that anything you read or see in the code or in any blog post is incorrect or anything like that, or just try to be respectful of everything. That's kind of my as far as a contribution to this conversation is just make sure we're all a nice, big, happy team serverless family, and just respect other people's contributions to the project.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I mean, I think the other thing is we're such a distributed group. We've got people from India, from Seoul, from Bulgaria, from all over the world, and sometimes the language people use, it isn't really what, the tone we read isn't necessarily what they meant. But I have seen some messages that make you think that seems really rude. You come here and ask that, or one thing and another, and it could just be that they're not a native English speaker and they don't really realize how it sounds. But yeah, if we can be respectful when we're talking to each other, definitely helps. And I think, assume that people have a good intent. Sometimes users do come and they kind of can be a bit dramatic. Like, this is a showstopper for me. Okay, well, maybe there's a way we can get around it without putting a round peg in a square hole, or vice versa. Okay, we also need to be ready to listen. And I know somebody turned up and they were very critical about the size of one of the binaries, and to begin with I thought, well, what does he know? And then actually we looked into it and we dropped the size like by 70%, and it was great. And so I think, we just have to be open. And, that's why there's a lot of new people here too, like Jules from Microsoft over in I think Canada. He gave a great response to how we've been using secrets with Kubernetes. It's like, I have a much better way to do it. Do you want me to tell you about it and add it to your docs? Absolutely, I would really love that. So I know Stefan is here. I can see Stefan. Do you want to give a couple of tips? What works for you?
Yeah, I think the most important tip, if you really want to contribute, as in write code, not testing or documentation. If you plan on writing code, I advise you to read the code first. So everybody has its own coding style, but when you come to a project like this, you have to stick with the current code style, and you have to understand why we made some decisions, or maybe some decisions looks bad, but maybe they are made this way because we want to cover multiple, orchestrators, and we had to make some workarounds to have the code work for them the same. So reading the code and understanding how this project is being written, I think it's the most important step before writing your code into it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that can be frustrating as well, right? Because I think there's times where the make file, like that I've put there, because I haven't had the time to make one really complicated, you looked at it and you're like, oh, I'd never write that. But it works, and if it's consistent across all of the projects, until we've got the time to change it everywhere, it's probably better to have something that's consistently okay than half of the time it's amazing and half the time it's completely different. Because we're doing it for you guys that are coming to the project new, so that you've got one view across the project.
Yeah, and another thing, for example, I have the urge to change things across all the projects. Like, one of my biggest fights was, let's change the dependency package. Let's switch to something new. Let's switch to dep. Let's switch to move from the old package. And I couldn't do it alone. It was impossible. So you guys stepped in and we made that transition very fast without having projects using one dependency library and another project other dependency library. So I think when we need to make changes across all the projects, we need to make sure we have a little team that is dedicated on this, focused on this, and will not say, okay, I don't have time, I will be back in 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks it's a long time to wait with unsync projects. So yeah, that was a successful story.
Yeah, as you know, I was part of that as well, and I think Umesh helped us with it. You know, the student that I mentioned, he saw that we had the ticket there and we'd done like 5 out of 7, and he was like, I'll just do the other 2 for you, and he tested it as well. You know, it's not always just doing the change, you've got to test it, because at the end of the day, you know, with 11,000 stars, that means people are using it. I had a meeting with Joost this morning from BT Research, and he's been using OpenFaaS for 7 months. So if we went and broke it, how's he going to feel on Monday morning, right? We want to try and you know, be respectful of each other and also of the system. So yeah, thanks. I see we have Vivek. Vivek stayed up really late in India. Vivek's one of the people that I really admire, because he'll almost take on anything and do a good job of it too. And I know there's been a bit of backwards and forwards where we're not always sure what is the right thing to do. And so we do a little bit of work and see, was that the right thing for us to do, and then push it forward. But Vivek, do you want to say anything?
Yeah. Also, I got introduced to this project last year through Hack Toolfest, and that was my first open source contribution. And I was really looking for contribute to any open source project. Then I found it interesting. Until now, I started learning about OpenFaaS, and then I started contributing. So till now, I have 15 pull request merged in OpenFaaS overall, and that's great. And one thing that I'll share with everyone is that we need to, whatever changes we are doing, we need to make sure that whatever we have done, it works perfect. Not perfect, at least we provide the test cases, whatever we have tested, so that we do not face any issues when it gets merged or something. So that is the one thing that I have been following, and it has been successful to getting my pull request merged, like showing my test results. So
yeah, the main reason why that is because when I have half an hour a day or every other day or an hour every other day to merge a pull request, the ones that I will merge are the ones that look safe or that look like that I don't have to worry about them. The more that we see you doing these changes, the more we get to know that you've done all the due diligence, the easier it is for that work to get in. So one of the tips I could give is, if you think the code looks like spaghetti, you might be right. But if you're adding a new flag, it might not be the right time to change that as well. And sometimes that's what can delay a pull request, is because you're doing 2 things instead of the one that you advertised. So I've seen that happen a few times, but most people are really good at doing this now. So try to keep things self-contained. Su Ye has asked us a question. How do you carry out the tests? Well, normally when you submit your pull request, tests will run on the server, but there's generally a make file and unit tests that you can run in each project. And testing may just be a verification. So when I added the build arg, if you look back at the pull request that I did, you see that I typed the code in and then I saw the result as I expected. And sometimes if you're going to actually, like this is for the core contributors, suggest some work for us to do, maybe there's something for Dale to do and John has come up with it. Write the test case in the issue so that when Dale picks it up, he knows how to verify it, and he doesn't have to reach out to you until he's done that. Makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah, and I like to add to this that don't trust the unit tests. It's okay to run them. They definitely must pass, but try to deploy your gateway image, your FastNetIS image, whatever you are working on. Deploy it on a test environment. Do some basic CLI tests or UI tests. Because you may catch something that the unit test cannot comprehend, because unit test is just unit test, but here we should also make sure we don't break any major, feature that depends on multiple services, like the deployment, right? That goes through the gateway, the controller, all back to the orchestrator. So
yeah,
always spend like 15 minutes trying that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. With a project that's using Docker in the core, that's using potentially Kubernetes and 3 or 4 different containers and networking, you really can't just run the unit tests. You got to really run it end to end as well. It's a great tip. So Ivana joined. Basically, I joined VMware to work full time on OpenFaaS, and Ivana joined me on the serverless team. We're actually hiring. We've got one position open in Bulgaria, in Cork, in Ireland, or in the UK, England, in London. So there's 2 of us now, and Ivana is going to tell us a little bit about what's worked for you when you've contributed to OpenFaaS as a complete newbie.
I missed first. I missed the first part of the meeting, so maybe you already discussed, and I can repeat something, I don't know. But what I would suggest is to communicate, and whatever you're working on, discuss it well, because first, there was example with one guy that contributed something without even raising an issue, and the pull request stays open, and it's hard to say after that we're not going to merge it. It's not the direction we'd like to follow, and even if it's something that is approved to be in, for example, I was working on a direct feature, and I had to rewrite the code in another behavior after a discussion, and I could save efforts if I discussed on time. So whatever you're working on, I would suggest to communicate on every stage, and this will save efforts for you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and it's even someone may be much more familiar and just can give you tips that would save a lot of investigation for you.
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing for me is where 2 people do the same pull request at the same time. And when you look at the issue, nobody said they were working on it, or one person did and they never checked it. And that, it's great, but it's also a little bit sad for whoever didn't get in. So look, we slightly changed the course of the meeting because I thought, all of this input from people on the project was so useful. There are a few more slides, so I'll share the whole deck afterwards. I just want to give you a few minutes now to ask any questions that you've got.
I had one thing to add sort of on top of that, so we haven't covered yet. I think kind of you with everything that sort of people contributed, I think if you follow all of that, you're going to be the absolute perfect contributor to any project. But one thing that can happen is the amount of time that you can spend contributing to the project can change. We've seen people that have had like things in their personal life come up, which mean they don't have enough time to spend working on things. People who are busy at work and don't have the same amount of time to work on things. Like for me, I got very sort of busy in work and had to drop down and contribute slightly less. And one of 2 things happens when people do that. They either just disappear and stop responding, and that's very difficult for the project because you don't know what to do. You don't know, should we get somebody else to work on it because the person isn't coming back, or do we need to just abandon the thing that they said they were going to look at? Whereas what you need to do is, if you need to drop back, just think about everybody else in the project and just have a word with somebody, have a word with Alex, have a word with sort of any of the kind of the sort of the core contributors, and just let them know that you're going to sort of be sort of dropping down for a little bit, and think about what you would need to do to hand off your work. So if there's something that you can finish, maybe finish it up. If there's something that you know you're not going to get finished, then talk to somebody and kind of explain what you were thinking so that that person can pick it up. And it makes things a lot easier for the project, because we're relying on sort of people's, contribution of their own time, which is extremely valuable and extremely sort of important. You got to remember that everybody else is giving their time, so we just need to be a bit careful with what we do when we don't have time to spend on it.
Yeah, I put this slide together, and it just echoes what John said. Really, is to be a good citizen and to communicate with each other. So, like if you were at work in a professional environment and you were doing some work and then you needed to change to a different project, your boss had asked you, would you just be completely silent and never communicate? No, you'd probably say, look, I don't think I can continue this. This is what I've done so far. And you may hand it over to someone, or you may just let someone know. And that doesn't have to be public. We don't want anybody to feel ashamed or negative about this. In fact, this is what this slide is about. It says the core contributors will support and mentor you, and we ask in return, you could just be clear and direct. If you can't continue to work on a pull request, you can't contribute to the project at all anymore, or you just don't know where to start, or you're stuck. And again, we'll be nice, we'll be supportive. We want you to succeed. We want you to keep building. And, we'll get you up and running again. If this is your first time and you feel a bit worried about that contribution guide, look, we want to help you get your first commit in so that you can feel part of the community. All right.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. If I may, came in without knowing any Go, and now I'm starting to write unit tests and making core changes to the CLI and things. And with help from Alex and Richard, sort of pushed me along on my first commit that was a total disaster. But definitely, I just asked for help. And hey, I don't know how to do this, and everybody stepped up and really helped out.
That's great. Is there anybody who wants to ask a question?
Yes, I want to ask a question.
Okay, Stefan. Go for it.
So, do we have any plans to run our own CI environment? Like, we have this problem right now. If you are contributing to a service, we run on AMD, we run on ARM, we run on ARM64. And it's very, very hard for a contributor that doesn't have an ARM at home or something like that to actually build the image to make some tests. Do we want to improve that in the future?
That sounds like something we should improve. I think you could write a GitHub proposal, and then we can try to see if we get any resources from some of the maybe companies that are involved in the project to help us build on those different platforms.
Yeah, I think the investment is not big. We just need one ARM and one ARM64 nodes in a Kubernetes cluster to use that for building. But it will be a good improvement for new collaborators.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We've got one more chat message here. Okay, thanks, Burton. So we just run to time. If there are other questions, I'm happy to stay on the line for 5-10 minutes. Or if anyone wants to say anything else, and I'll stop recording. Most of all, I just want to thank you for your time, whether it was early morning, your lunchtime, or late at night. You guys are why this project is successful. I want to thank you now, and I also want you to know that that I personally appreciate every contribution you make to this project, and everybody that's using it does too. You know, I want you to feel like you're part of this, and I want you to make something that you want to use. And part of what we'll do is, or I will do, is when we get to know you, send you out some swag, some stickers and magnets, maybe a t-shirt. I'm hoping to do more of that too. So look, thanks for joining, and if you need to drop off, let's wrap things up.